Welcome to MAP, the bi-weekly market access podcast provided by Mars Market Access and Pricing Strategy, which is your healthcare consultancy in the German-speaking markets. Mars makes it as easy as possible for you to get your pharmaceutical, medtech, or digital health product to the market and, of course, get the price it deserves. My name is Stefan Walzer. I'm the founder of Mars and a health economist by training and working in the fields of market access, reimbursement, pricing, and health economics already since 2004. Additionally, I have founded the consultancy P&N Pricing and Negotiations in Healthcare based in Toronto, Canada, which supports companies and individuals globally by coaching, simulations, and training, especially on negotiations. This service is including our innovative virtual reality simulation program and is part of the Negotiation Lab. And now let's learn about the market access and reimbursement systems around the globe. So, once again, we have the topic on market access on Switzerland, which has a couple of very specific, items and processes. And I'm very happy to have a real expert from the Swiss and within the Swiss system as well today with me, Heiner Sandmeier. Welcome to the episode on the Swiss market access.
Thank you for the invitation, Stefan.
Very good. Perfect. And Heiner, maybe some people do not know you so far. So maybe you can just give a quick introduction that we see, where you're coming from, which kind of aspect you have, handled in the last couple of years in the Swiss system, and then we can directly jump into the content of that episode.
Fine. Yes, I am a member of the Federal Medicines Commission in Switzerland, now in the 12th year, and this commission is kind of an appraisal committee for the drug reimbursement process. Until end of the last year, I was the deputy manager of Interpharma. This is the association of the research-based pharmaceutical companies. And my strongest focus over the years was on our pricing and reimbursement policies. I was also member of pricing and reimbursement, HTA and healthcare system working groups at FPA, the European Association in Brussels, and also at IFPMA, the Global Association in Geneva. So from these engagements, I could gather experience for more than 25 years in the healthcare system and especially in pricing and reimbursement. Since my retirement by the end of last year, I do some consultancy work for various customers in healthcare. And my scientific background is microbiology and public health.
I mean, it sounds already like a big kind of experience. And I think the interesting thing really here is, I guess, also the kind of combination what you have just described between, the industry, the system itself, and then also the HTA aspect, which is sometimes even a bit broader. And I think we'll touch base all of those areas in the next couple of minutes. But before maybe getting into some of those really details, maybe you can describe the Swiss reimbursement process for drugs, how you see it, and maybe also where you potentially also see some of the maybe also differences and maybe benefits of the Swiss system.
Yes, so let me first describe the process briefly and make some highlights on some features which are peculiar to Switzerland. So we have a compulsory basic health insurance that covers healthcare services quite comprehensively. This is true also for drugs, which are listed in a positive list called specialty list. There is a small deductible and a co-insurance of 10% for all reimbursed services, including drugs, with an annual cap of 700 francs for all services. So this means that we have 100% reimbursement for expenses exceeding the deductible plus the 7,000 Swiss francs. So if you're severely sick, after these 7,000 plus francs, coverage is 100%. To be eligible for reimbursement, a service must fulfill the so-called WCW criteria. The first W stands for Wirksamkeit in German. This is efficacy, effectiveness. The C stands for Zweckmäßigkeit, and you can translate this to appropriateness. And the second W is for Wirtschaftlichkeit, so this is economics and price. So for the drugs, let me first take a more detailed look at the criteria a drug has to meet for reimbursement. These requirements are laid down in the law and in specific ordinances. However, it's important to note that there is quite some room for interpretation with respect to the implementation of this regulation by the Federal Office of Public Health, which we call BAG, the Bundesamt für Gesundheit. So the basic rules are quite simple for drugs. It's a formula. It is the external reference price plus the internal reference price divided by 2. And the external reference price, the so-called APV, is the average of the list prices in 9 European countries, which are Germany, Austria, France, UK, Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark, Sweden, and Finland. The internal reference price we call TQV is an indirect benefit cost comparison with therapeutic alternatives. However, in practice, it often comes closer to a pure cost comparison with a low cost comparator than a true benefit cost comparison. For significant innovations, you can get an innovation premium on top of the TQV, or on top of a comparator in the TQV, to be more precise. However, in today's practice, you get it only on a comparator if you show superiority in a head-to-head randomized clinical trial with a significant added value. And in recent years, price models were added to this toolbox. This means that a reimbursed price can be below the average of APV and TQV, and the company has to refund the difference to the list price on a per patient basis to the insurer. So to make a first quick summary and highlight, it's important to note, compared to other countries, that we have no formulaic cost efficiency criteria. We have no official thresholds. We have no price volume criteria, and we have no fixed budget.
So everything good in Switzerland, right?
Well, yes. Let me continue.
Yes, exactly.
So, because this absolutely does not mean that cost efficiency, cost per patient or indication, or volume or cost increase in the market overall wouldn't matter. In contrast, no, the BAG is very sensitive to cost increases in the specialty list. But today, we have no formulaic standard tools to consider these parameters. What has already started and which will be followed further by the BAG is that they would like to develop the system further with price models in a flexible way that they can cope case by case with early access, volume, high treatment cost, and cost efficiency.
Yeah.
So this would be the first part to the criteria.
Yeah, that sounds also quite interesting. I think, especially as you have mentioned, the potential inclusion of cost efficiency or cost effectiveness, right?
Right. So we have no cost effectiveness requirement, and there is no study you need to provide. Sometimes companies provide a cost efficiency study on their own, but to be honest, they don't matter at all. For the future, it might be a requirement in the future, for example, for very costly rare diseases, where you don't have comparators, but this is something for the future. We have not really practice there.
Interesting. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, you have mentioned now also a lot of different, maybe call it items, right? I mean, significance, head-to-head study, and obviously significance is always as well, because you mentioned also different countries, which kind of outcome parameters, so endpoints are really included You mentioned the APV, the prices from other countries. You have reference to, let's say, internal Swiss comparator prices, right? The TQV, which is also a lot of times tricky to define. And sometimes you have different kind of opinions on that. From your experience, knowing obviously the system since a long time with all of the different items, etc., various obviously projects, what would you say are the main drivers for a positive decision with the BAG when thinking about all of those different criteria?
Well, the main drivers for a positive decision. You need a good product that meets a medical need. Very simple. No, but to be serious, there are, of course, a number of drivers. So if I would advise a company, then I would say first you should have a fair evaluation, really a fair evaluation and benchmarking of your clinical and also economic evidence. You need to be realistic. You need to go for the best possible, but you need to be realistic. And you should analyze the Swiss market and the competitive situation in depth. And also, I think you should look to the pipeline, to the future, to future competitors. You should have knowledge about the clinical practice in Switzerland, which might be not so uniform. Second, I think it's key that you have an elaborated strategy for the submission itself and for the pricing. Just as an example, if you have a multi-indication product in the Swiss system, it matters a lot which indication is first on the market and reimbursed and which follow. So this is a major consideration if you have a multi-indication product. And I think, as you can guess from my description before, you should have in-depth knowledge of the pricing rules and especially about the latest developments on the implementation of these pricing rules. Because the BAG is continuously developing the system, but to be honest, not in a very transparent way. So new rules are not published in advance or announced. They are just are developed on the run, and you need to be aware of the development. So this is very critical. And I think it's self-understanding that you need a high-quality submission. You just lose time in the process if, for example, the clinical evidence is not adequately described, or if the provided forms are not properly well filled in. And maybe my fourth point is you need for the negotiation process a clear communication strategy. Also, this should be pre-planned. And tools for this are certainly that you have discussion in advance with physicians, payers, decision makers, for example, in advisory boards. And for a company, of course, this is quite challenging to cope with all these tasks. Therefore, you need experienced staffs. You need also contacts to relevant stakeholders. And depending on the size of the company, you might find it quite challenging to allocate all these resources in a timely and efficient manner. And which is clear, you will be under great time pressure at several points in the process. Therefore, you need resources. And so my advice would be, in short, you should invest in market access early on, be it in an own team or in a collaboration with experts or both.
Yeah, exactly. I can only agree, obviously. No, but no, I think that's quite clear. I think it makes a lot of sense. I want to go again, maybe a step further back. I mean, one, you have already said that you have been part of the EAK, the evaluation body in Switzerland. And secondly, it's anyway and always, let's say, a key aspect of the evaluation of any kind of submission, especially when we speak about drugs. So could you maybe also elaborate briefly what the EAK really is, how they work, and what they are really looking for? I mean, there are a couple of aspects, I think, which are really important. And I think people might only, let's say, recognize and remember probably the BAG as obviously the key body for the submission, then also where the final decision is probably made. But the EAK, I think, is taken a really important part also within that evaluation process.
Yes, happy to do so. So let me first describe the process a bit in more detail, and then go to the role of the EAK and how we are working in more detail. So the process starts, of course, with market authorization by Swissmedic, which is a prerequisite, precondition for inclusion in the specialty list. However, you do not have to wait until the final decision of the Swissmedic for market approval. You can submit an application to the BAG for reimbursement with the so-called positive advance notice. So the reimbursement process starts partly in parallel with the market approval, but only at the end of the approval process. In a second step, then comes in the Federal Medicines Commission, the EAK, and the Commission discusses the submission and issues a recommendation to the BAG whether the product fulfills the WCW criteria and if the Commission recommends an inclusion in the specialty list or not. And the Commission receives the full application to the BAG and in addition, a fact sheet, which is kind of a mini assessment or more a micro assessment, I would say. So then after the Commission submitted its advice to the BAG, the BAG will open the negotiation with the pharma company and will finally decide on reimbursement and the condition for reimbursement. So as you can see, that the process in Switzerland follows the basic logic of an HTA process with assessment, appraisal, and decision. However, it lacks some of the features, from other countries like Germany or UK. So first, there is no independent assessment. The fact sheet, this micro-assessment, is written by the BAG, and this means that the decider himself is writing the assessment. Second, the Commission is kind of an appraisal committee, but it has very limited resources. It is administered by the BAG. So again, the decider administers the appraisal. The process has no hard timelines. So there is a relevant ordinance that states that the BAG should decide on reimbursement usually within 60 days of market authorization by Swissmedic. However, in practice, this timeline is not met. And today, the median is around 200 days, with a great variation from access within a few days to much more than a year. And fourth, the process itself, the recommendation of the Commission, and also the reasons for decision of the BAG are not very transparent. So there is no public information on the assessment, no public information on the recommendation of the Commission, and limited public information on the supporting reasons and conditions for reimbursement on the BAG. So I think this is also quite a significant difference if you, for example, look at UK and NICE. So maybe then to the work of the EAK itself. It is one of about 100 advisory commissions of the Swiss Federation, and it has 16 members. They are elected on a personal basis by the Federal Council for a 4-year term, and you can have up to 3 terms. An ordinance lays down the composition of the commission, and the major stakeholders have to be represented in the commission. These are the insurees, the payers, physicians, pharmacists, the hospitals, the cantons, Swissmedic, and also pharma. I'm an elected individual who represents the pharmaceutical industry. And I'm a full member of the commission, a voting member. Nominally, there is only one member of the commission from the university, which is selected as a scientific expert. So it's by design more a stakeholder commission than a scientific commission. However, in practice, all members have a scientific or medical background or both. So we have decent informed discussions and decision on the dossiers. However, with the exception of oncology, specific clinical expertise in the indication of a specific dossier is often lacking for many submissions. And in my opinion, and this is this is public knowledge that I am of this opinion, specific clinical experts should complement the work of the standing members of the commission more often, if not regularly. So I think this is really a big deficiency. How are we working? The commission meets 7 times a year for a full day. And typically we deal with between 20 and 30 submissions at each meeting. And the submissions are for new products. So first submissions, line extensions, also second submissions after conditional reimbursement. And in addition, we might also discuss an HTA report or other matters related to drug reimbursement. We received the submission documents approximately 6 weeks prior to the meeting, and the fact sheet of the BAG between 2 and 4 weeks prior to the meeting. So we have enough time to prepare. And at the meeting, it's again the decider, the BAG, who presents the case and asks questions to the commission. The president and the internist leads the discussion. And we discuss sequentially whether the product meets the WCW criteria. So first, relative effectiveness. And there usually we discuss whether the evidence base is sufficient to show the comparison at the benefit in comparison to other listed drugs. We discuss treatment line guidelines, etc. Second, then appropriateness, and this ranges from pack size to the question whether it is an appropriate therapy in the context of already reimbursed alternatives. This is kind of a soft criterion. We also look there at the opinion of HTA bodies around the world on the product. Yeah. And it's often quite interesting to see that there can be quite a variation of opinions.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And third, then the price, and there the commission does not propose a specific price, but usually, I should say always, is of the opinion that the price is too high and the BAG should negotiate a better price. And then last but not least, the limitatio. This means the restriction on the label and the condition for reimbursement are then discussed. And after that, we issue a recommendation whether the product should be listed or not.
Exactly. No, I think that's I think a really good summary. And I think once, just to wrap that finally up, once the EAK has, let's say, recommended positively or negatively for a product, the BAG is taking the different kind of opinions in there, is writing that up, and then the communication is then outside of the EAK, right? It's just between the BAG and then the pharmaceutical company.
Absolutely. So as I already alluded, the whole process is not transparent to the public. There is no information flowing back and forth in the process. So after the recommendation, the BAG takes over and follows the process. And the commission is not informed on the further proceedings.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. You have also mentioned a bit the, let's say, the development of pricing models, which is one part, right, with the BAG. On the other hand, we have complexities, or maybe call it more complex products, like all of the various ATMPs, which, let's say, especially around the launch time, at least at that time, still a quite maybe complicated evidence base, sometimes just because of the number of patients. Sometimes there are also other reasons with a, let's say, high price, right? What is the kind of endeavor in that direction in Switzerland? Is that still, let's say, regulated primarily through the BAG, or is that more something where maybe quite complex pricing arrangement, even with very few patients, should or maybe are now being handled directly with the various health insurances in Switzerland?
That's a very interesting question. First, we all know what ATMP stands for, but legally it's not an official term in Switzerland. So ATMP is from the EMA, and Swissmedic has other categories. So in the future, probably we will also switch to ATMP to be more compatible. I think that would be quite reasonable. So what is an ATMP in EMA in Europe? You will find in different categories in Switzerland in Swissmedic, and also in the reimbursement area. So we have ATMPs which are on the specialty list, and we have ATMPs which are not. And it was a big question with the first CAR-T therapies, whether they should be on the specialty list or not, whether there is a legal basis, first of all, to have them on the specialty list or not, because traditionally the specialty list is a positive list for drugs in outpatient care. However, this was never very strict. So the question was, are CAR-T therapies, which clearly are, at least in the first years, inpatient therapies, should they be on the list or not? And the BAG came to the conclusion that it is not clearly regulated, which means that they can decide as they like. So there has been no clarity on this matter. And the first CAR-T therapies, actually, you do not find on the specialty list. And the BAG sent them to negotiations between hospitals and insurers, and then included them in another list, so-called KLV Anhang 1, which means that the BAG, the federation, is not performing a WCW analysis and the pricing, but it's just up to the hospitals and the health insurers to set the price. Now we have a number of health insurers in Switzerland. However, it's not so bad as it seems if you just count the insurances, because there are insurance groups. And the bigger insurances formed the consortia to negotiate such complex therapies. So we have consortia of insurance which cover a significant part of the market. But it's a very fair question whether such a small country like Switzerland really should afford such a diverse system, which is certainly not very efficient, and maybe also in terms of quality and equity, not a good solution. So I would agree that we are not in the best worlds that there could be. It's a development that started, and personally, I regret that these matters have not been clarified earlier, because we all have seen the pipeline. So you could have acted proactively. Unfortunately, this was not done proactively enough.
Things are as they are, right? I mean, they are anyway, I think, always, let's say, pros and cons and positives and negatives. I think you have described also very nicely the various process steps of the system itself. So just towards the end, I mean, you have been obviously representing the industry, but you know the kind of details within the system. So if you have maybe a couple of few minutes to, let's say, promote to come to Switzerland with a company, with a pharmaceutical company, maybe outside of Europe, right? So they're deciding to move into the European continent, but obviously we know that Switzerland, let's say, it's unique. You have just said it's not part of the EMA, so there's a separate regulatory body called the Swissmedic. So it is quite complex. But why should maybe a company move to Switzerland also with their products and then launching their products in Switzerland?
Yeah, good question. So traditionally, the advantage of Switzerland is certainly the pragmatism. So I know, Stefan, you're German, but I still dare to say it's quite a contrast to Germany. So if you follow the German reimbursement process, I heard that the record submission probably years ago was 1 million pages.
I couldn't imagine. Yes.
So this would be unimaginable in Switzerland. So everything is not too much administrated, pragmatic. In the end, it's the same issues, the same questions, the same problems. I think in all countries, the comparator is the key, and it's also here the key. But you approach it in a different way. So I think if you know the Swiss system, the mentality, if you have a good communication strategy and communication skills, then I think Switzerland is an attractive place to launch a new product. And it traditionally is a test market because it's small. Switzerland is quite wealthy and has different cultures, different languages. So it's a bit a complex clinical environment. You can test here. That has traditionally been the advantage. And until a number of years, another advantage was that you really got a good price compared to other European countries. Today, I would say we are in the average. So we are not outstanding anymore. So probably this is not anymore such a big advantage. But if you have a really good product, I think the uptake once you're in the market is still very good, although the market is small.
Yeah, no, fully agree. So thanks a lot, Heiner, for all of your insights. It was really great and interesting to listen to the various aspects you have brought in, especially, I mean, as a lot of the information you've just shared are not, let's say, not easy to find, maybe call it like that, especially obviously as you were speaking on your experience from within the system. So thanks a lot for your time, and talk to you soon.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
So as we have just heard, Switzerland is a kind of pragmatic market access system. It has its, let's say, pitfalls. It has its positives, as Heiner has as well just described. Obviously, and as everywhere, there are, let's say, the kind of mandatory steps where a dossier needs to be submitted, which is by far more pragmatic than, for example, in Germany, but also, for example, in comparison to France or to the UK. I think it's a big focus on the clinical data, but especially and obviously also on the number of patients, so the kind of budget impact, and ultimately the pricing. The pricing is being, let's say, held especially on the internal price comparison against other available therapies in Switzerland with the Swiss price, and also kind of evenly distributed with the prices of the product which is being submitted in other countries. Important to mention here is probably especially the process within the BAG, which is especially when the evaluation committee, it's a so-called EAK, is assessing and discussing the case. As Heiner also just said, per meeting there are around 20 to 25 cases to be discussed, and as one could imagine, there are not hours then available to really discuss it, especially when there is no clinical expert available. So ultimately, and That's quite clear. And Heiner said that also, I think, 3-4 times. Very important is also not only the content itself, but also the communication strategy within the dossier, but also then later on when it comes to the feedback, to the reply to the BAG, when they have, let's say, the kind of, maybe call it for the questions, or you could also be a bit more nasty and just say the kind of, let's say, questions raised around the pricing. Ultimately, and that's very important, also the Swiss system is further developing, especially around pricing models. There are, let's say, various models now being implemented in that way, not very transparent and not obviously transparently communicated. And on top, Heiner said already, when there is an 18P available, there might be even, let's say, different pathways to move, especially then also with the health insurances. Finally, there is still that big pragmatism in Switzerland, I would also say, to find a solution, which is also helping a lot when submitting the case to Switzerland and then making the product also available to the Swiss population. That was an episode of MAP, the Market Access podcast provided by Mars Market Access and Pricing Strategy, which is your healthcare consultancy in the German-speaking markets. MAP is available every second week with a new episode, so watch out. And in case you might have questions, contact me directly and or visit our website on www.marketaccess-pricingstrategy.de.